Welcome back to Fusty Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Naomi Clark darted to the crowded concourse of King's Cross Station, heart-hammering as the 7:45 a.m. train to Manchester hissed impatiently. Her week had been a blur of late-night deadlines and underappreciated brilliance at the marketing firm. She slumped into the only remaining seat, wedged between a sleepy teenager and a man in a crisp navy coat whose cologne smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Exhaustion wrapped around her like fog. Her eyelids fluttered closed for what she thought was a moment. When she woke, the train swayed and her head had slipped not onto the window, but onto the stranger's shoulder. Daniel Hayes, the man in the navy coat, froze at the gentle weight against him. Her curls brushed his jaw. Her soft breathing tickled his neck. He glanced down, intending to nudge her awake, but something stopped him, the sheer peace on her face. In a world that never paused, here was someone entirely surrendered to rest. He turned his head slightly, pretending to read, while fighting a smile. The carriage rumbled through countryside light, a quiet intimacy growing between two souls who hadn't even spoken. When Naomi startled awake 40 minutes later, mortified, her cheeks flamed. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, adjusting her blouse. Daniel's chuckle was low, kind. "No harm done. I was honored, actually." That simple line made her heart stutter. She bit back a laugh, thanked him awkwardly, and gazed out at the blur of fields rushing by, completely unaware that the stranger beside her would soon alter the course of her life. The silence that followed was surprisingly comfortable. Naomi pretended to scroll her phone, but her mind replayed his voice, calm, rich, teasing. Daniel caught her glance in the reflection of the window and decided to bridge the gap. "I'm Daniel," he said, extending his hand. "Professional shoulder lender." She laughed, shaking it, and replied, "Naomi Clark, professional napper." Their handshake lingered longer than expected, warmth spreading up her arm. As the train sped north, conversation bloomed like spring between them. They spoke about mundane things first, coffee preferences, work commutes, delayed trains, but each answer unveiled another layer. Naomi confessed her dream of opening a creative agency someday. Daniel revealed he was an architect returning from a project presentation. There was a rhythm to their words, a natural harmony that made time melt. For the first time in months, Naomi felt seen, not as an employee or a friend filling space, but as a woman whose thoughts mattered. When the intercom announced their arrival, a strange ache filled her chest. Neither wanted to end the conversation, yet neither dared say it aloud. Daniel scribbled his number on the corner of her notebook before standing. "In case you ever need another train pillow," he joked. She smiled, tucked the note safely into her purse, and whispered to herself as he disappeared into the crowd, "Don't lose this one, Naomi." That evening, Naomi stared at her phone for hours. Should she text first? Would that seem desperate? Finally, with a deep breath, she typed, "Thank you for rescuing my tired self earlier. Hope your meeting went well." She hesitated, then hit send. Within minutes, a reply buzzed. "Best part of my day was your nap, honestly. Let me repay you with coffee tomorrow." Her grin spread uncontrollably. The next morning, they met at a small cafe near Street Pancras. Daniel was already there, leaning against the counter, dressed down but effortlessly confident. Over lattes, they slipped into conversation that felt like continuation, not beginning. She teased him about his obsession with symmetry. He admired her quick wit and unfiltered honesty. The coffee cooled, but their energy warmed. Each smile, each glance, added invisible threads binding them closer. When they parted that afternoon, London's chill felt softer somehow. Naomi walked away humming, her mind replaying every second. She realized she hadn't felt this alive in years. Meanwhile, Daniel watched her fade into the distance to the fog cafe window, whispering to himself, "Don't let this be just a coincidence." A week later, gray clouds soaked the city as Naomi ran late again. She spotted Daniel on the same train, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Seems the universe likes punctual accidents," he said, sliding over to make space. They laughed, droplets glistening on their coats, and soon they were sharing stories of heartbreaks past. Daniel spoke of a fiancé who'd chosen her career abroad over their love. Naomi admitted she'd stopped believing in forever long ago. As rain streaked the windows, Daniel reached for her hand without thinking. His palm was warm, steady, and it grounded her. They didn't speak for a while, just watched the water trace patterns across the glass. In that silence, something unspoken settled between them. When the announcement came that the train would terminate early due to flooding, they burst out laughing, drenched but giddy. They found refuge in a small station cafe, steam rising from their mugs as thunder rumbled outside. Naomi, feeling bolder than usual, asked, "What if life just keeps throwing us on the same train until we figure out why?" Daniel met her gaze, eyes soft. "Then maybe we should stop running from it." The spark between them grew into something undeniable. Weeks blurred into comfort. Every few days they met, sometimes planned, sometimes by fate. Naomi started keeping a small Polaroid camera with her. On one sunny ride to Brighton, she snapped a photo of Daniel laughing mid-sentence. The picture captured his dimple, the sparkle in his dark eyes, the relaxed version of him she adored. "I'll frame this," she joked. "Proof happiness exists." Daniel smiled but saw the loneliness beneath her humor. Later that day, he surprised her with a candid photo of her sketching on the pier, hair wild in the sea breeze. "Now we're even," he said. Their laughter turned to quiet as the waves crashed. They stood side by side, not touching, but connected by something deeper, trust. That night, Naomi placed the photo beside her bed. She realized how much space Daniel had already taken in her thoughts. It scared her, but in a thrilling way. She whispered into the dark, "Please don't let this end like the others." It happened one Friday evening. Naomi, leaving work late, spotted Daniel at a restaurant window with a stunning woman. They were laughing, their heads close. The sight felt like a punch. Without thinking, she turned away, heart heavy, telling herself she'd been foolish to believe. All weekend, she ignored his calls, her mind looping that image until it bruised her. When they finally met, Daniel was confused and hurt. "Naomi, talk to me." She kept her arms folded. "You don't owe me explanations." "I get it." His eyes widened as he realized the mistake. "That woman, she's my sister, Layla. She's visiting from Birmingham." Naomi froze, shame washing over her. I'm sorry I jumped to conclusions." He sighed, but instead of anger, there was sadness. "You could have just asked me." The silence between them that day was heavier than any argument. Naomi apologized again, tears escaping despite her restraint. Daniel took her hand gently. "Next time, trust me, I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, she believed him. After that misunderstanding, something shifted. Naomi began letting Daniel see the raw parts of her, the insecurities, the scars from past betrayals. They spent late evenings walking along the Thames, sharing dreams and fears. Daniel, too, opened up about the pressure of being perfect, the expectations of his family, and the loneliness success couldn't fill. Vulnerability became their new language. One night, as the London Eye glowed across the river, Daniel turned to her and said softly, "You make the noise stop." Naomi didn't reply. She simply leaned against him, resting her head on his chest, the safest place she'd ever known. They stood there, wrapped in the hum of the city and the quiet rhythm of each other's breathing. From then on, love wasn't dramatic. It was consistent. Coffee in the mornings, text before meetings, silent support during hard days. Naomi started to believe that perhaps love could be steady, not stormy. And Daniel realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't lonely on the journey. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel received an unexpected call. An architectural firm in Singapore wanted him to lead an international project. 3 years abroad, life-changing money. His hands trembled as he hung up. It was everything he'd worked for, but all he could think of was Naomi's smile over morning coffee. That evening, he told her, "It's an incredible opportunity," he said carefully, "but I don't know if I can take it." Naomi's heart clenched. She wanted to tell him to stay, but she also wanted him to succeed. "You can't turn down your dream because of me," she said, forcing a smile. He reached for her hand. "You're part of my dream now." The room filled with quiet emotion, too much for words. They spent that night in half-spoken sentences, promises tangled with fear. When he finally left her doorstep, both knew their love was being tested. Whether it would survive the distance was a question neither dared answer yet. Days passed. Weeks followed. Daniel postponed his departure, but couldn't avoid it forever. Naomi, meanwhile, buried herself in work to avoid thinking about goodbyes. When they met again at King's Cross, the same platform where it all began, there was nostalgia in every glance. "Maybe we'll always belong to this train," she said softly. He smiled sadly. Then let's make sure it never stops. He boarded first, and for a moment, Naomi thought she might collapse. But he reached out, pulled her close through the open door, and kissed her like it was both hello and farewell. The train pulled away. She stood frozen as tears blurred the lights. The space beside her felt heavier than air. For weeks after, they spoke through screens and time zones. But messages became shorter, calls less frequent. Love strained under distance. Yet something in Naomi refused to give up. She looked at his photo on her bedside and whispered, "Come back to me." 6 months later, Naomi was walking through King's Cross again when she heard a familiar laugh. She froze, turning, and there he was, suitcase in hand, same navy coat. "You didn't think I'd stay away forever, did you?" Daniel grinned, eyes soft with longing. The world seemed to fall silent as she ran to him. They collided in an embrace that drew cheers from nearby commuters. "I finished early," he whispered into her hair. "All I wanted was to come home to you." Naomi pulled back, tears shimmering. "You mean that?" He nodded, brushing a thumb over her cheek. "You're where I belong." In that moment, all the loneliness, all the distance dissolved. They sat together on the same train they'd first met, holding hands as the carriage hummed. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder again, smiling. "Full circle," she murmured. Daniel laughed softly. "Only this time, don't wake up too soon." And for the first time in forever, she simply rested, finally home. Naomi hadn't seen it coming. One evening, as they walked through Hyde Park under the golden glow of streetlights, Daniel suddenly stopped. He looked nervous, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes shimmering with something tender yet uncertain. "You know," he began, voice trembling slightly, "I used to think love was about control, about planning, timing, and perfection. Then you fell asleep on me that day, and everything I thought I knew just changed." Naomi laughed softly, not realizing where this was heading. But when he dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box, her world froze. "Naomi Clark," he said, smiling through his nerves. "Will you marry me?" Her heart thundered, her breath caught. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." The crowd nearby broke into spontaneous applause, a few strangers cheering. Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, and for a moment, it felt like the entire city stopped breathing, the night air alive with joy, disbelief, and the magic of a love neither had expected. Later, in her flat, Naomi stared at the ring glinting in the dim light. It felt unreal. "We're really doing this," she whispered, half to herself. Daniel kissed her forehead. "No more accidents, Naomi. Only choices. And I'm choosing you every day for the rest of my life." Every fairy tale hides its shadow. Weeks after proposal, Naomi began noticing changes, subtle at first. Daniel became quieter, distracted during dinners, often staring into space. "Work stress," he said whenever she asked, but she could feel something deeper gnawing at him. Her old fears, the ones built from past betrayals, started creeping in again. What if love was always temporary? One night, she found him sitting alone on their balcony, scrolling through messages with an expression she couldn't read. "Is there something you're not telling me?" she asked softly. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's the Singapore firm again. They want me back. Permanently this time." Silence swallowed the room. "And you didn't tell me sooner?" she whispered, tears threatening. "I didn't know how," he said honestly. "I'm scared of losing what we built." Naomi turned away, staring into the fog outside. "You promised me we'd choose each other," she murmured. "But it feels like life keeps testing that promise." Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "I just need time," she said. And in that moment, the glow of their engagement dimmed under the weight of reality. Days turned into weeks of uneasy silence. Naomi buried herself in work again, pretending the ache didn't exist. Daniel tried to bridge the distance. Flowers, dinners, small notes, but something fragile had cracked. Love, she realized, wasn't just about grand moments. It was about showing up, even in fear. And both of them were learning that the hard way. One afternoon, she found herself on the same train where it all began. She sat by the window, the hum of the tracks echoing her heartbeat. She closed her eyes, remembering the first time she'd leaned against him without meaning to, and how safe that it felt. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She missed that simplicity. Daniel, meanwhile, stood at a construction site miles away, his phone heavy in his hand. He typed a message. "I can't lose you, Naomi. Let's fix this," then deleted it. Pride and fear warred inside him. He didn't realize that love's truest test wasn't distance, but the courage to stay vulnerable even when everything felt uncertain. It was Layla, Daniel's sister, who showed up at Naomi's flat unannounced. "He's miserable," Layla said bluntly. "He won't admit it, but he's lost without you." Naomi stood frozen, torn between anger and longing. "He made his choice," she replied. Layla shook her head. "He chose you. He just doesn't know how to fight for you the way you need him to." They talked for hours, and Layla's words echoed long after she left. Naomi realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. She grabbed her coat, heart pounding, and headed for the train station, unsure what she'd say, but knowing she couldn't let silence finish their story. As fate would have it, Daniel was there too, pacing on the same platform. When he saw her, he froze, eyes wide. "Naomi," he whispered. She smiled through tears. "Still catching trains, huh?" He laughed shakily. "Only the ones that matter." They stood there, the city rushing around them, and hugged like the world was ending and beginning all at once. That night, a heavy storm swept through London. They ran laughing through the downpour, soaked to the skin, holding hands as thunder rolled above them. "We're insane," Naomi shouted. Daniel grinned. "Maybe, but I'd rather be crazy with you than sane without you." They stumbled into his flat, dripping water across the floor, breathless and euphoric. As lightning flashed, Naomi looked at him and saw not the man who'd almost left, but the one who'd stayed, vulnerable, imperfect, human. "We're going to keep making mistakes," she said quietly. "I'll forgive yours if you forgive mine." Daniel nodded, eyes glistening. "Deal." They kissed, the kind of kiss that felt like home, messy, desperate, real. Later, wrapped in a blanket, they watched the rain streak the windows. "We'll face life one storm at a time," Daniel said softly. Naomi rested her head on his chest, heart steady for the first time in weeks. "As long as you're beside me," she whispered, "I'll never be afraid of the rain." Months passed, and healing became habit. Daniel declined the Singapore offer. Instead, he proposed opening his own design studio in London. "We'll build something together," he said. Naomi joined him, combining her marketing skill with his architectural brilliance. They worked side by side, learning not just to love but to partner, to balance chaos and care, ambition and affection. The studio flourished. Clients came in waves, impressed by their synergy. Yet, beyond the work, what mattered most was the peace they found in each other. Evenings were sacred, home-cooked meals, laughter, quiet music. They learned to celebrate small victories, a finished project, a shared breakfast, a hug after a long day. One night, Naomi looked around their cozy apartment, the photos, the scattered sketches, the love that had grown from a train seat, and whispered, "We really did it, didn't we?" Daniel kissed her hand. "We turned an accident into a lifetime." The day of their wedding dawned clear and golden. Friends and family gathered in a glass-roofed conservatory filled with flowers and soft music. Naomi, radiant in ivory satin, walked down the aisle as Daniel's eyes filled with tears. She wasn't just beautiful. She was peace, resilience, love embodied. When they exchanged vows, every word carried the weight of everything they'd survived. "You were a stranger on a train," Naomi said softly, voice trembling. "And now you're my home." Daniel smiled, his voice steady despite emotion. "You taught me that love isn't found. It's built one moment, one choice at a time." Their first kiss as husband and wife felt like the universe finally exhaling. As the night wore on, laughter and music filled the air. They danced barefoot under fairy lights, the city skyline glowing behind them. For once, time didn't feel like an enemy. It was simply part of their story, endless, forgiving, beautiful. Weeks later, they moved into a small townhouse near Camden. Creaky floors, too many stairs, and sunlight spilling through every window. "It's imperfect," Daniel said. Naomi smiled. "So are we. That's why it's perfect. Together." They painted walls, unpacked memories, and filled the space with laughter. Each room told a story. The Polaroid from Brighton, in the living room, their train tickets framed in the hallway. On quiet mornings, Naomi would curl up by the window with coffee, watching Daniel sketch designs at his desk. It was ordinary, yet extraordinary, proof that love didn't need constant fireworks, Sometimes it just needed presence. One evening, she whispered, "Do you ever think about how random it all was? One nap, one seat, one train." Daniel smiled, wrapping his arms around her. Maybe fate isn't random at all. Maybe it's the world's way of giving us second chances. Years later, Naomi stood in the same train carriage, this time holding Daniel's hand and a small ultrasound photo. "We started here," she whispered. "Now look at us." Daniel kissed her forehead, eyes misty. From strangers to parents. Who would have thought? They spent the ride reminiscing, laughing about missed stops and spilled coffee. The other passengers smiled at their warmth without knowing they were witnessing the living proof that accidents can become destinies. Naomi placed a hand over her belly and whispered, "Maybe our child will believe in serendipity too." As they stepped off the train, Daniel turned to her. "You once said love was scary. Still true." She smiled through happy tears. "Not anymore. Not when it feels like coming home." On their 5th anniversary, they took the train again, same route, same seats. Naomi rested her head on Daniel's lap as their daughter, Maya, giggled nearby. "Careful, Mummy might fall asleep again," Daniel teased. Naomi chuckled. Wouldn't be the first time. Outside, the fields rolled by under golden light. Inside, laughter and quiet love filled the space. Naomi thought about all the storms they'd weathered, all the moments they'd almost lost each other, and how every single one had led here. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Thank you for catching me, even when I didn't mean to fall." Daniel stroked her hair and whispered back, "And I'll keep catching you, for the rest of forever." The train hummed softly beneath them, carrying not just passengers, but a love story that started by chance and never stopped moving. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.